predicting the future. Can we really predict the future? If we did, we'd know when to buy our homes or when to buy certain stocks or sell certain stocks. We'd know what job to take. We'd know who to marry. We'd know quite a bit about how to live maybe a better life if we could be able to predict the future. Some believe you can't predict the future. That's the focus of our discussion. Can you predict the future? The one central argument that I think we can agree upon is that while you can't predict the future, you can best analyze the present and determine what the likely future could occur. If nothing else, if we work on the theory of percentages, maybe, just maybe, we can have a 20 or 30 or 40 or 50% chance of something happening. We can eliminate at least what doesn't happen, or we can use as an advantage that this could happen. No matter what process we take, our goal should be to try to understand the present and understand trends of the future. From those trends, we have to do some analysis. Analysis means breaking apart. We have to break apart the present, break apart the future, and try to cobble it together in a way that we can make a reasoned and sound decision. Not an easy thing to do, but not an impossible thing to do. There's some that have perfected the art of predicting. And throughout our discussion in the coming minutes, there's one thought I want everyone to remember. Predicting the future is a trait and characteristics that robots and artificial intelligence simply can't do. They require humans to feed them certain information. And from that information, they may use some kind of data techniques in order to make a prediction. But so much of what has been input into the computer derives from the human mind. Therefore, the ability to best predict the future can be that singular trait or characteristic that determines the success of an individual and the success of a business in their future. So let's talk about how best we can predict the future. There's not many slides we're going to go over. But the one thing I want to remember and restate as we go through is what got you here will not get you there. It's one of my favorite sayings that I've seen. What got you here will not get you there. That means that you have to change your perspective, biases, stereotypes, that you have to understand that the strategies that allowed you to be successful today may be the exact strategies that will cause failure tomorrow. That means that we have to continually analyze the information that we're presented and determine whether it's timely and relevant, not just today, but also tomorrow. Can that be done? Sure it can be done. I'm going to give you some strategies to do it. But it's important to realize if you're going to try to predict the future, if you're going to take a best guess, which we often say an educated guess about where the future lies, then that means that you have to be able to analyze the present without any type of biases or stereotypes. The statement that says, that'll never work, it's never worked in the past, somebody else did it and it won't work, those are statements that can constrict your thinking. And as a result, they can inhibit your ability to make a reasoned decision based on deductive reasoning and also the various strategic tools that we use to gather data, to analyze data, and then to, based on the unbiased review of that data and information, try to make a prediction of the future that has a best likelihood of coming true. We live, of course, in a world that's changing at a considerable pace, whether it's politics or economics or societal. There's individuals we thought never would have been president or a senator, never would have passed certain laws. Who could have predicted that that event would have happened? There's some that say, I could have told you that I predicted that. What's interesting is some that predict an event that has a low percentage of occurring, people would say at one point they're crazy. But we have to look at those individuals who made these predictions, look at the data that they collected, look at the way they analyzed that data, and see if they saw something that our mind wasn't able to see. And then we have to adopt that thinking so that we can make a more reasoned decision about the future in our next instance. Industries that last for generations are no longer as dominant in their field. General Motors is certainly not dominant in their field. There was a MySpace, and now there's a Facebook. Is there going to be something after Facebook? If history is a guide, of course. Before Walmart, there was Woolworth, and then there was Sears, and there's Payless and Thrifty, and so many stores that have come before Walmart. Of course, after Walmart is Amazon. Is Amazon going to maintain the competitive position that they have for the foreseeable future? If we look at history, the answer is no. That there's going to be a stumble, a new entrant is going to come into the marketplace and change the very nature in which we shop. So if you're looking at Amazon, the key point that you want to make today is, based on the variables that exist in the market in which we operate, how are those variables going to change in the coming years? And based on those variables changing, how do we need to reposition our firm in order to provide those services to maybe a different population? A person who can answer those questions, as I talked about with this foreshadowing and forecasting, a person who can make those determinations and predictions will have an invaluable effect on the organization. And those are the types of individuals where compensation knows no bounds. We all want to be that person who studies the present in such a comprehensive manner, who has a calculating mind to take the information that they've obtained and to make predictions that may seem far-fetched to some, but in reality, they're attuned to where the world is moving towards. So a key question remains, why can't we predict the future? And there's really 4 reasons why we can't predict the future with great regularity and specificity. But first, I want to talk a bit about this quote. While we can't predict with near certainty the future, we can invest the time and effort to identify trends, take advantage of these trends, and then determine the best likely outcome. So when we talk about prediction, some people say, well, that's a truth teller. Or how can you be a truth teller? We can't predict COVID or some of the other dramatic events that have occurred that certainly upend the very way in which we live and work. However, we can invest the time and effort to identify certain trends and then take advantage of the best likely outcome. The best likely outcome. That's really what we're looking for, is how to determine the best likely outcome. It's difficult to do. We can't predict the future. Determining the best likely outcome is a challenge for a number of strategies and for a number of reasons. If we can overcome these 4 impediments, we may have a better chance of predicting the future than if these impediments still exist. So whether we're studying sociology or project management, being able to look at the variables that affect our ability to predict the future and ensuring that we've taken these aspects into account and they don't impede our efforts to make a valid prediction on the future. Nothing is 100% certainty. The old saying is death and taxes. Outside of that, everything is up for debate. So we want to make sure that we look at these variables and make sure that these variables are not impediments to us making these kinds of reasoned and sound predictions in the future. Lack of knowledge, more factors that affect our future than don't affect our future. There's complacency and laziness, and there's biases. So let's talk about these 4 aspects that we want to overcome. Lack of knowledge. If you don't study, if you don't do research, then all you have to rely upon to make a decision in the future is the knowledge you possess. And if the knowledge that you possess is not pervasive, if it's not substantive, the end result is you only have that knowledge to rely upon, And odds are you're going to make a decision that doesn't take into account the totality of factors because you haven't studied the totality of factors and circumstances. There is so much more knowledge today than ever before. But most importantly, it's so much easier to obtain the knowledge than ever before. When I was going for my master's at USC, I had to spend a lot of time in the library. At that time, the internet wasn't as pervasive as it was. Similarly, when I was going for my PhD, I still had to spend quite a bit of time in a library because so much of that information wasn't well known. When I was a library director, we were overcoming the precipice of this knowledge generation, where so much more of the information that was contained in a library, where you can only obtain in a library, the average person who had rudimentary skills in search through Google or other internet sources was able to find the information that previously you would have to go to a library to obtain. Libraries in general haven't kept pace with the changing environment. They still operate as if you need to talk to a librarian to collect data. That no longer occurs. So much of the data could be obtained through any type of search on Google or other search engine. So while there's more knowledge in our world today, there's also an easier way to obtain that knowledge. So for those who have a lack of knowledge, it really deals with a lack of effort. And we'll talk about effort in a bit. But the type of lack of knowledge, or the type of knowledge that we need today, is aspects like, why do businesses fail? Why did the market fail? Why did a politician lose an election? There's that great saying that says, those that don't learn from history are destined to repeat it. There's another saying that says something like, history may not repeat itself, but it does rhyme, which means similar outcomes follow similar inputs, or similar outputs follow similar inputs. If you expect a different result by following the same process that resulted in a failure, most likely you're going to have a failure again. And so we need to learn from the mistakes that have been made in the past, and that's where knowledge comes in. So to put this into practice, if you were going to open up a business, let's say a restaurant, and the business that operated before you was also a restaurant, and you're occupying the same space, you should know why that restaurant failed. Maybe the restaurant failed because that place, that shop, that storefront was not conducive to customers. Maybe there was a lack of parking. Maybe it was a space on the wrong end of the street, and it was too difficult for people to park and to go get their lunch or dinner and then come back. Maybe it was the lack of space within that storefront. Whatever it is, if you want to open up a similar business, you need to find out why that one failed. It doesn't have to be the same storefront. If you want to open up a certain type of restaurant, and that certain type of restaurant has not been successful in that city, it may be because there's not enough people that like that type of food. And though your food may certainly be good, it's not going to be successful because if you would have done some research, a poll, calling on the phone or going door to door, would you eat this type of food? Would you eat at this type of restaurant? You may get an answer quite quickly that the answer is no. And you would be more able to predict the future, and the future being that your restaurant is going to fail, simply because you don't lack the knowledge of why the last restaurants failed. You don't lack the knowledge of what citizens in that city are looking for in a restaurant. The knowledge that you have gained through your research is going to be able to educate you that the prediction of this restaurant is not great. It does not appear that there's going to be a significant consumer base for your restaurant that is going to be able to provide you with the likelihood of success. Without this type of knowledge, it's virtually impossible to predict futures. There's so many variables that you can eliminate just through research. If you obtain the knowledge, then you can make a decision by saying, We've looked at this isn't going to work. We looked at this isn't going to work. We looked at this is not going to work. And at the end of your research process, you're going to be able to predict the future with a higher degree of certainty that your restaurant either will or will not succeed. Knowledge should give one the basis or the foundation to make a better prediction about the future. That's only one step, of course. There's many factors that affect the future. And so as we look at predicting the future, we have to realize that though we may do some exhaustive research, there are some factors we simply can't control. There's, in times previous, in the 1800s, about 2% of our economy in the United States was based on imports and exports. Now the figures are anywhere from 30 to 60% depending on imports or exports. In fact, about 30% of our economy is either an import or an export. Some industries are almost 100% impacted by an export or import. Their customer isn't next door in the next town or in the next state. Their customers are almost all overseas. And their competitive position is impacted by what happens in numerous continents throughout the world. So it's more difficult to predict the future. We understand that. And there's also factors such as global warming technology, world hunger, world trade, which we talked about, that also impact our ability. Health is a huge issue as well. We still have an impact of COVID, and others have said that there's other types of health crises that may occur, that may impact an organization. There are some things that we just can't control. A friend of mine, him and his wife, were going to open up a beauty salon, a salon that catered to doing certain types of hairstyles and nails, and so very much a needed store in their locality. They saved money and they opened up their store. They happened to open up the store just before the pandemic occurred. They lost everything. So no matter how much research they put into their future, they made the wrong decision. But looking back, there's nothing they could have done that could have predicted that that would have occurred. So that's why we say there's many factors that affect the future. The best that we can do in predicting the future is to eliminate so many of those factors as possible. And then you may say, these factors we have no control over. I've mentioned previously about knowns and unknowns. And what we try to do is to research the knowns and make a fundamental decision on the knowns. Meaning, I know about inflation. I know about interest rates. You can make, in some ways, a reasoned decisions about that. The unknowns is who would have thought the pandemic would have occurred. Very few, if any, determined that the pandemic was going to occur that year, and those were the repercussions. So those are unknowns that you can't control. But in predictions, we look at what can we control. Let's concentrate on what we can control, make reasoned decisions, which follow exhaustive investigation, make reasoned decisions, and then the uncontrollable remain uncontrollable. That takes us to complacency and laziness. This may be the singular greatest factor in why some cannot predict the future. Some are satisfied with their present state of affairs. Maybe they own a company that's successful. There's limited competition in their industry. And so they're saying, enough. I know what I'm doing. What's worked in the past is working in the present. I'm not worried about the future because things are going so well. I used to teach in colleges, a number of colleges, career coaching. And I had a series of career coaches, and we put together some websites for a university. And I remember talking to one person who says, I don't need to go through career coaching. And I said, why not? It was actually a requirement for one of the classes. And they had said, because I'm going to work for our family firm. It's what I was going to do since I was young. I was raised to take over the family business, and that's what I'm going to do. And I remember asking, What happens if the family firm closes? And if you've ever seen somebody with a blank look on their face, they had a blank look, almost like, I can't imagine that ever happening. This is my destiny. And therefore, my future is already planned, and I see no changes that are going to cause me to rethink the future that I have. The danger is, of course, is that you're happy with the present and you don't research the future. I often say that the unexpected expectedly occurs. And so while you think it may be unexpected, if you research that issue or that problem, you may realize it really wasn't unexpected. If you would have done your research and looked at the trends, you would have foreseen, you would have had the foresight that that's going to occur. So I have another saying that says the inevitable inevitably happens. So for those who think it's inevitable or it's inevitable, there's no way it could ever happen. And then it happens. There's no way that football team is going to lose the game. There's no way that that fighter is going to lose the fight. And then they do. And if you would have researched the fighter or researched the football team, you would have realized that they started to rest on their laurels. They started to rest on their success. They didn't prepare for the future. They lost the hunger to continue to battle to be the best. And other teams who had a greater desire to win overtook them. They become lazy about their future, and they're ill-prepared and surprised when it arrives. If your knowledge base is outdated and you're unaware or uninterested in the occurrences of today, then you're going to find yourself unaware and unprepared for a future that is certainly going to occur. And that comes from biases. Biases, in addition to complacency, is where you have a preconceived notion. This isn't going to happen to me. I'm going to be prepared if that happens. That didn't happen yesterday. It's not going to happen today. We can't predict tomorrow, of course, unless, though, we honestly confront the realities as they exist today. And this is what constrains the thinking of so many people, in that they have these biases of what works and doesn't work. And so when we look at the aspects of what causes us, what hinders us, which constrains us from predicting the future, it is the inability to gather as much knowledge as possible about our future. It is a sense of complacency. I'm fine with the way it is. It is the biases that we have. All of those variables inhibit our ability to think clearly and rationally, and they inhibit our ability to think of a future, certainly a different future that exists today. And while we can't, as we've known, talking about this issue, predict the future, we can better understand the present. We could determine the trends that are occurring in the present. And from those two foundations, we can make some sense of determination on where, as I often say, we should point the arrow. And sometimes just being able to point the arrow is enough for us to determine where we should place our resources to take advantage of it. But unless we know in what direction, even if it's just degrees, in what direction to place the arrow, we have absolutely, positively no idea where the future will be, other than making a decision on pure luck. We can gain more knowledge by reading and listening to a wide variety of people. We avoid this sense of complacency, and then we recognize how harmful biases are. Knowing our future is not determined by what happens to ourselves, but rather what we do for ourselves. We can determine a better future for ourselves by realizing that we have to take more control, and control is a key word here. There's so many statistics that talk about a changing future. that in the coming years, about 40% of all jobs are going to be eliminated. Technology, robots, artificial intelligence are going to be taking away about 40% of all jobs. There's some people in industries today that are studying to advance within that industry. And it's an industry that's not predicted to be around in the next 5, 10, 15 years, or certainly not offer the type of job prospects and compensation that'll give people, afford people, a certain lifestyle or standard of living. Yet people still are in those professions. There's people in professions that clearly technology will overtake. That those jobs that are performed by humans are now going to be performed by robots and artificial intelligence. One statistic indicated that 88% of all jobs lost today are because we don't need a human to complete the job. And so I believe that maybe, just maybe, the characteristic that separates the successful from the less successful is the ability to foreshadow and foresight. If you as an organization can, through your interviews and interactions with the individuals and potential employees, find those that have a clear understanding of their present and have a clear understanding of where that future lies within their industry, within their economy, within their political system, within their country, within their world, whatever their environment is, if they have a clear understanding of where they think the future is going to go, those are the individuals that are going to be at the forefront of the organization. Those are the individuals that really have the best chance of not only maintaining their employment, but advancing their employment. People always ask, what are the traits that a person needs today? The last slide will tell you in a bit, but I always tell people dreams and determinations. The traits that the person needs today is to dream of a better future or a different future and be determined to achieve it. The dream of something better, the dream of something different, and then be determined to achieve it. That comes from the ability to have a sense of foresight and foreshadow. Those who can see the future, which is a dream, and then have the determination to achieve it, at least to try. Those are the two characteristics that I believe are foundational and lie at the heart of a person's success in the future. I hope everybody enjoyed our presentation about predicting the future. And it's a future that can be predicted based on degrees, percentages. And those percentages go up the more that you research, the more that you avoid complacency, and the more that you avoid biases. That'll give you a plate. That'll give you data, information that you can rely upon to make a more concerted decision about the best opportunities that you have in the future and where the future lies, not only for yourself, but for your organization. Those individuals that can provide that guidance to an organization, which I call foresight. Those organizations that can determine through their research the dream of where their industry or their world is moving, and then also showcases the determination on how that can be achieved. Those are the ones that can control and dictate the world we live in the future. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the day.